the floor to Ms. Fatima Rajabali. I see she's already online. She is from UNFCCC. She coordinates a portfolio of climate change adaptation projects activities for the Nairobi Work Program at the UNFCCC. I'm sorry for reading it. There's so many titles that I have to read and I don't want to make any mistake. And please, Fatima, correct me if I was wrong. And your work focus is on climate information services in sub-Saharan Africa, political economy of climate change adaptation, and implementing and evaluating strategies for research uptake to inform decision-making processes. While she's presenting, please ask your questions via chat. And maybe, Fatima, if there are some questions for clarifications, we can also try to answer them. Fatima, the floor, the screen is yours.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. It's great to be here. I just want to make sure that everybody can see my screen.
I can perfectly see it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for the introduction, and it's great to be here today, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. This workshop is an exciting space to be in because I know it brings together a very vibrant and active community of practice. During this session, I'm going to briefly touch upon the Nairobi Work Program, who we are, provided a little bit of messaging, key messaging that's emerging from the scoping paper that we're pulling together, as well as introduce you to the Climate Dialogue event, which I'm not officially organizing. We just have one session among many sessions that are taking place over the course of the coming fortnight. So, firstly, to introduce you to the NWP, the Nairobi Work Program. Who are we, what do we do, and how do we fit into the equation? The Nairobi Work Program is the first UNFCCC stakeholder platform on adaptation and resilience. And we connect constituted bodies, institutional arrangements, and non-party stakeholders. So it's a bridge between these different communities. Our work is demand-driven. In other words, that means that we are being responsive to adaptation knowledge needs of parties, in particular developing countries, including LDCs and SIDS. Every year, we are requested to focus on a specific priority theme. And this year, we've been asked to look at biodiversity and climate change with an
Fatima, yeah. I'm sorry, I don't want to be impolite. Are we supposed to see a presentation now?
Yes, you should be able to see my screen.
Yeah, no, we can't see it. We see you, which is, of course, much nicer than the presentation. But if we care about content, maybe this somehow it didn't upload.
It didn't load? Let me try again.
Yeah, try it again. Sorry.
No. I'm glad you stopped me there. What can you see now?
You. Now it's turning black and it has a circle. Now we can see it. If you keep it away,
great.
Perfect.
So,
sorry. Yeah.
No, that's good. I am trying to change to the slides and struggling to do that. Okay, can you see this? The from knowledge to action.
Yes, we see the timeline or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I'll start here. It's as I was mentioning, our thematic work on biodiversity and climate change adaptation will be emphasizing on forest and grassland ecosystems. So the intention of our thematic work is to analyze and present how forests and grassland biodiversity and ecosystems can be better integrated into adaptation strategies, most especially in the formulation and implementation of NAPs and NDCs. So we know the importance of forests and grasslands and the huge potential in adaptation strategies, but there are still challenges and knowledge gaps for implementing national adaptation strategies that integrate these elements. And the Nairobi Work Program is using a knowledge to action approach to explore this issue. So based on what you see on the screen, we have convened a number of group of experts from 23 diverse organizations, many of whom are actually speaking today at your event, to discuss challenges, to draft a scoping paper and provide inputs into a scoping paper, as well as incorporate knowledge from case studies. So as part of this process, we will then co-design actions to strengthen adaptation planning and support also the work of constituted bodies at the UNFCCC. This includes the LEG, which is the Least Developed Countries Expert Group. I'm sure some of you have already been engaging with them directly. And they've done historically a lot of work on EBA. The Standing Committee of Finance that actually are prioritizing NBS this year, and the PCCB, which focuses on capacity building. So these constituted bodies will also be conjointly working with us to address and identify the challenges and knowledge gaps identified through the scoping paper. And ultimately, this will all culminate at an event at COP26. So just to kind of ensure that I'm speaking on, I know that you've had somebody from the CBD speak yesterday, but just to kind of make those links again, that the Rio Conventions and the interlinks between the Rio Conventions are really important. And there are a lot of collaborative efforts that are ongoing. Of course, the synergies definitely need to be scaled up, and there needs to be more, and there is increasingly more political momentum to do this and to facilitate this, especially across the different strategic frameworks and the Paris Agreement. And with the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, this will really invite us to continue with these ongoing sort of collaborations. So jumping into the scoping paper, I want to first quickly acknowledge that our scoping paper, we're looking at a number of different adaptation options, including EBA, which falls under the umbrella of NBS. This includes traditional hard technological options, as well as social, institutional, and hybrid options too. So our work has, over the past few months, culminated in a number of different case studies being brought together. And this has really been a collaborative effort with a number of our expert group members sharing case studies. I just want to also mention that a lot of our analysis and lessons learned have merged from these case studies, and they include EBA, NBS, CBA, hybrid solutions across the globe, including Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So just to touch upon a couple of them, for example, in Isiolo County, a climate change fund that really helps prepare counties to access global financing for adaptation and climate resilience. Or in the Namakwa district in South Africa, where EBA solutions are being used to rehabilitate critical rangelands and wetland ecosystems. The same with the Hindu Kush Himalayas, where an integrated approach is being used to adapt to water shortages and flash floods. A couple of other case studies that to kind of to share with you is what's happening in Peru when they're combining green and grey infrastructure to restore water flows to native grasslands and pastures. And community forest user group driven sort of EBA approach, which also is an income generator for women. So with these case studies, and we have many more to share as part of our scoping paper, but with these case studies in mind, what are the knowledge gaps that are emerging from this work? I'm just going to mention a couple. One is the scientific knowledge gaps, such as linkages between different aspects of biodiversity, ecosystem functions, and adaptation services. Another is under, the kind of complexity of social ecological systems and their various sort of components, and how indirect and direct drivers of change interact to affect the system. So we need more of a knowledge base around that and evidence base around that. And another, just to mention before I move on, is methodologies to appraise options, particularly non-economic benefits over time. With this, also we have identified a number of capacity challenges from our case studies, some of which include the need for standardized methodologies and capacity for monitoring and evaluation, such as the lack of long-term monitoring infrastructure and programs. Additionally, we need more capacity to enable transdisciplinary and cross-sectoral collaborations, which I know is a major challenge at hand. And it goes without saying that we all acknowledge that financing needs to go beyond short-term location-specific funding. I don't have a slide on governance challenges, but I do want to point out a couple of things that have emerged from our case studies. It is valuable to highlight that, ecosystems cross geopolitical boundaries, yet transboundary planning is challenging due to the multiple scales of governance when we talk about, in between and across countries. Issues of land tenureship is critical as well, because especially in the context of local disenfranchised communities, and especially where indigenous rights are not being respected. And in addition, one final thing to mention is a lack of methodology for considering and balancing different trade-offs, such as trade-offs between the prioritization of different ecosystem services, as well as at times the trade-offs between different actors. So what are the key lessons learned that have emerged from in our paper? One of the things to note, there's a little bit of background noise.
Yeah, I know. I'm just contacting her. I think she didn't notice, but it will be solved. Hold on, and just continue.
One of the things, thanks. One of the things to point out is a couple of things to point out as part of our lessons learned is, one, the value of combining strategies to maximize effectiveness. And there are a number of different sort of examples that are provided as to how we could do that. Another is the importance of genuine participatory approaches, which also include local economy resilience assessments. And we have, and the necessity of sustainable financing models. And we actually have some good examples from Kenya and South Africa that we have captured as part of our case studies. Let's see. Yeah, and then following on from that, a couple of other lessons learned is how can we be more gender responsive in our work, most especially when it comes to enhancing benefits for women and their livelihoods, as well as the importance of collating disaggregated data, the value of integrating traditional knowledge and not just for the sake of traditional knowledge, but actually integrating it and using it as a medium to be part of the planning process, as well as the necessity for better transboundary planning. The last thing that I want to cover is the kind of, we need to strengthen our enabling conditions and enabling environments. And that also includes not just empowering formal structures, but also the kind of various customary informal structures that are there. The support of policies, for example, of indigenous land rights, and also improving communications to ensure effective communication across and between different stakeholders. So with this in mind, kind of moving on very swiftly to what does this all mean and what do we hope to get out of this scoping paper? Well, as I mentioned earlier, we, the NWP, will be facilitating this kind of partnership to co-design actions to close a number of these knowledge gaps that have been identified. And this will be through the expert group that we already have with our constituted bodies. And we hope to engage also other organizations who are working in this area, which I know belong very much to this community of practice. So next year, we'll be coming together to discuss how we can further strengthen national adaptation planning through a variety of these mechanisms, including, compiling information lesson on ecosystems, on compiling examples of diverse financing approaches, amongst others. With that in mind, I just want to invite you to attend our event tomorrow that will bring together a number of people who are also speaking today, who are part of our expert group. And we'll be kind of, getting the opportunity to really look at some of these knowledge gaps and challenges that have been identified in more depth. We will also have the current presidency and the incoming COP presidency as representatives speaking. How do you join? Well, go to this link, bit.ly NWP_biodiversity. It'll take you to our events page where it'll guide you as to how you can join if you haven't already. At this point in time, the official registration through, for the parties and observers is not possible anymore, but you can still join us through a virtual platform. And just to let you know, tomorrow at 1:30, we'll be meeting in the Venus conference hall. But if you go to this link, you'll find out more information. And very finally, we're still looking to engage with you through your contributions and your case studies. And we will be providing, developing a resource base through the Adaptation Knowledge Platform that will really bring together all these case studies. And we also have a community of practice, a group under the FEBA. So I look forward to our continued engagement and responding to your questions. And also, of course, my email information, etc., is on the platform that was presented to us earlier. So thank you very much for giving me this time. And yes, over back to you.
Thank you very much, Fatima. It's Fatima, right? It's the right
Yes, it is Fatima.
Right? Fatima. Thank you very much. It was really concise and very clear presentation to me as well. I had a question in mind, but there is a question from the chat. So I will turn away a little bit to look on the screen, and you can probably see it yourself, but I will read it. So Deepanga Aich, again, I don't know if I pronounce the name correctly, pardon me for that. What about transboundary, also water, forest, inland navigation, biocorridors, natural resource diplomacy? A lot of the case examples here seems to have quite a bit of dependency on the specific geopolitics. So basically, yeah, what about the transboundary?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question to ask. This is definitely part of the conversations that we will continue to have next year. Absolutely, it's going beyond just the geopolitical and the kind of political boundaries that you mentioned and the resource bases. But I mean, one of the great things about bringing together a community of practice or an expert group that consists of different areas of technical expertise, it invites us to look at all these issues from different lenses. And as you can imagine, through the UNFCCC, we have the added advantage of directly engaging with parties. So keeping that in mind, that's definitely something for us to consider when we're also compiling our case studies. So if you have a case study to share with us on that note, please do so. Yeah.
Okay. I actually have a question.
Yes.
Because, coming from the area, or let's say my initial, when I entered the area of biodiversity, I started off, I'm still in the topic of ABS, Access and Benefit Sharing, Nagoya Protocol, which is a very specific topic, of course, and which deals a lot, also tries to include traditional knowledge, communities. And what I read from your slides in this regard, again, what we also mentioned yesterday, if you participate, maybe you weren't there, but we also discussed this community communication, right? How to reach, how to make use of the knowledge that is there to communicate adaptation, right? And how to improve it. So, and it's I mean, and you said it basically, but to me, it was interesting to see that this is something that pops up everywhere. How to include communities, but also how to base our work on their knowledge, right? To have their voices heard and lifted up. Is this a right perception that this is really a core part?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. So one of the avenues that we're taking as part of reflecting on and bringing in the issues of Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous rights is through the LCIPP platform, which is also part of the constituted bodies at the UNFCCC. And actually, it is a unique space, a unique platform, because this particular constituted body has brought together for the first time ever under the UNFCCC, Indigenous peoples and representatives, IPOs, as well as parties and other stakeholders. And so it really is becoming quite a value add space to ensure that when we are talking about Indigenous rights and Indigenous knowledge, which is also different from community knowledge, it's to kind of to ensure that we're being appropriate in the way that we talk about integration, to ensure that the language that we're using and the processes that we are using, including, in one of the slides I mentioned, to ensure that we are using instruments that that have informed consent in advance of just assuming that all traditional knowledge can be integrated and used in a variety of different ways. So I think this is part of an ongoing conversation that that will constantly require better kind of informed practice on how we go about doing this.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure there are case studies out there that are doing fantastic work already that, that are bringing this to life.
Yeah, and like you're saying, it also deals with basically human rights as well. I mean, this is just very, very strongly linked, and the technology is there. And I think it becomes interesting when you talk about how can these technologies also be valorized to uplift socioeconomically. This is also, but okay, but we only have limited. I would love to talk more about it, and I'm sure a lot of people. I'm just checking to the left. Okay, no, you answered the question to the satisfaction of the person who asked the question. So thank you very much, and for the entire presentation.